Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Press for Truth TV. Today is Monday, January 21st, 2013, a day which will go down in history, a day which we ought to be recognizing the great works of a very powerful and influential American who changed this country. And no, I'm not referring to the second inauguration of President Barack Hussein Obama, who was just sworn in for a second term, although he did change this country, but certainly not for the better. No, I'm referring to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a champion of the civil rights movement. This man was very outspoken, a critic of the government. He applied the non-aggression principle through civil acts of disobedience. And this is a man who understood oppression and was trying to show people how to deal with it by simply leading by example. And so it's certainly not without a sense of irony that on this day that we ought to be recognizing the great works of Martin Luther King, that we have somebody like President Barack Obama being sworn in for a second term, a man who has signed the National Defense Authorization Act, which completely goes against everything that Martin Luther King Jr. stood for. In fact, I'd like to share with you a clip today from a speech that was given recently by Dr. Carnell West, who explains just what it would be like for someone like Martin Luther King Jr. if he were alive today and was subjected to the current Obama administration.
Martin Luther King Jr. was under the FBI surveillance from January 1956 till the day he died. Governments can be repressive, vicious, ugly, violate your rights, violate your liberties, crush your people, generate the propaganda. We need that sensibility too. Governments can also be affirmative if they're helping poor and working people. Governments can use their power to support corporate elites. That's the beginning of crypto-fascism, when they come together with no accountability whatsoever, not just politically, but economically. That's in part where things are moving. Let me say this. Martin Luther King Jr. today could be taken to jail without due process or judicial process under the National Defense Authorization Act, because he had a connection with a freedom fighter who was called a terrorist named Nelson Mandela. He just got off the terrorist list in 2008 of America. Let's be honest about that. Because he had a relation to a terrorist, and under the present administration, you can assassinate Americans, you can take them to jail without due process. That's a repressive side of the government that the black freedom movement has always been suspicious of. We got black political prisoners right now in America. And they're in there precisely because the repression came down so hard and their love was such that they were willing to tell the truth that was a threat to the status quo. And we don't even talk about them.
And indeed, Martin Luther King was going against the status quo. And if he were alive today trying to do what he was doing, he would be silenced under the Obama administration through the National Defense Authorization Act. Of course, he was silenced in his time. The only difference now is if he were alive today, or if he were here today, he would be silenced just like he was back then, only it would be done legally now. And so that's why in a time now when everything is flipped up, turned around by the Obama administration, we have to support the MLKs of our time, the people who are currently critical of the government and speaking out against the oppression of the Obama administration. That's why I'd like to share with you a clip from a concert for Obama's inauguration, which took place last night in Washington, D.C., in which hip-hop artist, Grammy Award-nominated hip-hop artist Lupe Fiasco was performing at this show, and he announced that he didn't vote for Obama, and he went into his anti-war song, and he ended up jamming on the tune for a solid half an hour just to lay the message home. And that eventually led to Lupe being kicked off the stage and no longer allowed to perform at the show.
What? I think it's rhythm. Oh.
So a huge shout out goes out today to Lupe Fiasco for taking a stand and making his voice heard, and also to anyone out there who leads by example and stands up against these oppressive governments, especially in these very troubling times. And on that note, I'd like to close today with a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. himself, in which he said, "The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy."